Hey, it's Rick here, and buddy, do we have a mess to talk about today. So, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is about to hit theaters. The guy adapted a 3,000-year-old Greek epic, cast half of Hollywood, and shot the whole thing on some ungodly IMAX format that's apparently going to melt your eyeballs. And normally, that's the kind of movie news that just exists. People argue about it on film Twitter for a week, everyone moves on. But not this one. This one's turned into a full-blown shit show, and the woman at the center of it is Lupita Nyong'o. Now look, Nyong'o's an Oscar winner. She's talented, nobody's arguing that. Nolan cast her as Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world. And yeah, that casting choice kicked off a whole online argument the second it was announced. But that's not even the part we're getting into today, because the casting drama, that's old news. What's happening right now, days before this movie drops, is so much dumber. Back in May, Lupita sat down with Elle magazine and dropped this gem. She said, and I quote, "I really had no idea what the Odyssey was before landing the role." This is a Yale graduate, by the way, Ivy League, telling a national magazine she'd never heard of one of the most famous stories in the history of human civilization. She said her first reaction to getting cast was basically, quote, "Oh snap, I don't know the first thing about this." And then she had to cram the whole epic like it was a final she forgot was on the syllabus. Okay, fine. Honestly, not everybody's read Homer. That part alone isn't the crime. Plenty of actors take a role and go learn the source material after the fact. That's just how the job works sometimes. The problem is what she did with her brand new 3-month-old Homer knowledge once she had it, because that's where this whole thing goes off the rail. It goes from never heard of the Odyssey to full-on Homer scholar in about 8 weeks. Cool, totally normal timeline. Fast forward to the press junket, days before the premiere. Interviewer Jake Hamilton, decent guy, does solid junket interviews, asks the cast a fun little hypothetical. Imagine Homer himself is sitting next to you in the theater watching the movie. What do you ask him? Now, most of the cast handled this exactly how you'd want. Matt Damon, Tom Holland, they talked about the text, the character work, what it's like adapting a 3,000-year-old oral tradition into a modern blockbuster. Thoughtful stuff. And then it's Nyong'o's turn. And instead of any of that, she decides to scold a dead poet. Her answer, word for word, "So Homer, how do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little you spend with them?" Smiling, laughing, like it's the wittiest burn in the history of press tours. She's out here fact-checking the guy who basically invented Western literature on a screen time technicality. And look, in a separate interview, she went further, saying, quote, "Very little time in the Iliad and the Odyssey is spent from the perspective of the women, and that it's told from a real masculine point of view." Here's the thing though, and I gotta be fair for a second. That's not a totally insane opinion to hold. People have debated gender and perspective in Homer for literal decades in actual academic circles. That's a real conversation. The problem is who's having it. This is a woman who 90 days ago told a magazine she didn't know the story existed. You don't get to speed run a crash course and then start grading the final exam. And the internet, being the internet, did not let this slide. Within hours, people were pulling up her own L quote next to the Homer clip, basically going, "Wait, didn't you just say you'd never read this?" One commenter actually went scorched earth, pointing out that the goddess Athena, a woman, literally drives the entire plot of the Odyssey from start to finish. Like her fingerprints are on every single page of the thing. So the no female perspective take kind of falls apart the second you remember who's steering the whole story. Naturally, the meme machine fired up immediately. Edits, screenshots, the whole 9 yards. Because nothing gets the internet moving faster than watching somebody get caught in their own timeline. But Rick, you're thinking, final stretch. Because this thing didn't stay contained to one junket clip. It turned into the whole Odyssey press tour's main character energy. This wasn't exactly a calm rollout to begin with. Elon Musk had already been sniping at Nolan on X over the movie, at one point calling him a worm and accusing him of, quote, groveling to win an Oscar with the casting choices. So the temperature was already hot before Nyong'o even opened her mouth about Homer. Now, and I want to be straight with you here, some of the backlash aimed at Nyong'o has genuinely crossed into ugly racist territory. That stuff isn't clever, it isn't funny, and it's not what this video's about. We're not touching that side of it. There's a real, fair critique buried under all this noise, and that's the one worth making. And the fair critique is simple. You don't get to build a whole press narrative around the patriarchy silenced women in this text when you'd never opened the book 3 months earlier. That's not activism. That's a crash course with a soapbox attached. And to be clear, this isn't just some rando podcaster's hot take. Critics at actual outlets have made the same point, that the women got no space in this storyline is a rough fit for a text where a goddess quite literally runs the entire plot from the shadows. On the flip side, and fairness matters, so let's say it, Nyong'o has also pushed back on the idea that Helen's just a beauty prize to look at. She says she wanted the role to be about who Helen actually is, beyond the most beautiful woman alive label. That's a genuinely defensible thing to want out of the part. Credit where it's due. But wanting more depth for your character and lecturing a 3,000-year-old dead poet on screen time percentages? Two very different things. One's good acting instinct, the other is just a bit of a mess. So here's where it all lands. The Odyssey opens July 17th, IMAX, the whole spectacle. It might genuinely be great. Early reactions out of London have actually been pretty strong. But it's launching into a press cycle that spent more time talking about Homer's syllabus than the actual movie. That's it for this one, folks. Drop your take down in the comments. Is this a real conversation about representation, or just a celebrity getting caught overselling a crash course? Hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. This has been Rick, Film Flop, out.